When his team needed him most late on Wednesday night, Francisco Lindor delivered the game-winning RBIs to put the Mets on top over the Rockies. Lindor can't do it alone this year, though. On today's show, I'll break down who can be the Robin to his Batman as the Mets look to make this run into the playoffs.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Well, when the Mets went on this road trip, we saw the first couple series, and I think you would have imagined the Mets were going to just cruise through, right? They're going to play the Angels, a bad team. There was one game that was supposed to be really tough against the Cardinals. It wasn't. And then you were going to play the Rockies for 3 at altitude. You score a bunch of runs against a bad team, bad pitching staff. You just cruise your way into Seattle for the real test of the road trip. Well, here's the funny thing. I can't wait to see the Mets play the Mariners this weekend, even though that is by far the best team they have seen in some time, a team that is leading their division with one of the best pitching staffs in baseball. And I want to see this anemic offense against them because for some reason, I feel like they're going to hit better. There's something about these sub-500 games or sub-500 teams that you play in these games that just makes the entire experience so frustrating when it doesn't go the Mets' way. And I'm talking like this after a Mets victory, but that's because the first 8 innings of this game were excruciating. Ryan Finkelstein comes out after the first inning, the Rockies starting pitcher. It's a terrible bullpen. And yet, for the first 8 innings, the Mets were just stuck at 2 runs. Now, they did score early. The Mets scored a run in the first, thanks in large part to Francisco Lindor, who got a leadoff single. He stole second base on a strikeout with Brandon Nimmo at the plate. One of 3 strikeouts from Nimmo on the day. 24th stolen base of the year for Lindor. He advanced to third on a ground out by Jesse Winker and then scored on a base hit by Pete Alonso. So 1-0 Mets. Now that run was given right back in the bottom half of the inning as Paul Blackburn gave up a home run to Ezekiel Tovar. Blackburn pitched well. We'll talk about that more in a second. But that was 1 run for the Rockies. Top of the second, Jose Iglesias, Ben Gamel, and Tyrone Taylor all got base hits to score 1 run for the Mets. Francisco Lindor actually ends up ending that inning, getting picked off of first base after he had grounded out. After grounded into a force out, I should say. Stayed on, then got picked off. But from that point on, from Lindor getting picked off in the second inning, it was like the faucet just turned off on the Mets offense. First 2 innings, it looks like they're going to have a good day offensively, then nothing. Now, Paul Blackburn kept the Mets in the game, pitched really well. He gave up a leadoff double in the 3rd inning, pitched around it. 4th inning wasn't as fortunate, leadoff double, then a pass ball put the runner on third base, and then a chopper to Jose Iglesias ended up scoring the run. But from that point on, Blackburn was able to lock in, and overall really was very effective. Just like his last outing, we've seen a change in pitch mix as he's come to the Mets for whatever it's worth. These first 2 starts, we've seen him lean into throwing his cutter significantly more. Now, I talked about this after his last start, how his cutters actually pitch that have been hit pretty well the last couple of years, but maybe the Mets identified something because it has been a very clear point of emphasis in these 2 starts. His cutter has been his main pitch that he's been working off of, and then also a heavy dose of his changeup, and it's all working for him. It really is. He goes through his second start in Mets uniform, another quality outing, 6 innings pitched, 5 hits, 2 walks, 2 runs, but only one of them earned as the pass ball by Francisco Alvarez goes down as an unearned run. 6 strikeouts, has his ERA down to 3.86. With the Mets, it's even better than that. Pretty crazy that they were able to pick this guy up. For Cade Morris, that's it. It's going to go down, I believe, here as one of the best trades of this past deadline to get Paul Blackburn with control. A guy that maybe not a lot of teams really even envisioned being on the market just because he had a foot injury that kept him out for a long time. Mets did their homework, got a good one. And so that was really one of the best takeaways of this game is Paul Blackburn is looking very good, solidifying the back of that Mets rotation. Now, after Blackburn, Jose Butto got the Mets through a couple more tough innings. Seventh inning gives up a leadoff hit, then balks the runner to second base. So he had a pitch with a runner on second, nobody out. Butto was able to strand that runner, did a great job, retired the last 6 batters that he faced to get the Mets all the way into the 9th inning. And that's when they finally broke through offensively. And again, this is after facing the bullpen and being on their 6th pitcher by the time they got to that 9th inning. Noah Davis threw 4 innings and allowed just 1 run for the Rockies, a guy with the career 7.71 ERA after this outing. He had only pitched 9 1/3 on this season, and his whip was, I think, 1.8. So how that guy was able to get through 4 frames without giving up more runs is beyond me. But going up against Victor Vodnik in the 9th inning, the Mets were able to get the job done. Francisco Alvarez started it off with a 1-out triple. Ben Gamble drew a walk to put runners at the corner. And I don't know about you guys, but personally, when Ben Gamble walked and they're showing camera shots of Tyrone Taylor, actually, I think it was before the walk. I think when it was a 3-1 count. Ben Gamble sitting there, and they show Tyrone Taylor's on deck. And in my head, I thought, oh, don't walk. Don't walk. I wanted Ben Gamble to put bat on ball and just get that damn run in because I had no faith in Tyrone Taylor, which maybe is a shame on me. He has been swinging it pretty good lately. But I just envisioned when that walk happened and it set up a double play. I just saw it. I saw a hot shot to shortstop and somehow, even though Taylor's fast, a double play ball. Luckily, that didn't happen. Tyrone Taylor drew a walk as well, so that loaded the bases. Francisco Lindor comes up. First pitch swinging on a pitch on the outside. He goes with it, laces it into left field, drives into Lindor, being the Mets MVP yet again, putting his cape on and carrying this team. Huge hit. Brandon Nimmo had a chance to add on. He struck out. That was his 3rd of those strikeouts on the day. An 0 for 5 performance from Nimmo. We'll talk about him more in the next segment. Jesse Winker actually came through. After that, though, he was batting 3rd, DHing in place of JD Martinez. He got a hit, and that drove in another run to give the Mets a little bit more of a cushion. It's funny because I think I said going into this series, maybe it was yesterday, Jesse Winker, I think it was actually yesterday. I was like, Jesse Winker, probably going to get a chance to start with the righty on the mound. Maybe he could take advantage of playing in Coors, get like 3 hits. That's what he did. He went 3 for 5 today, and that was a big RBI for him. So hopefully Jesse Winker can get going off of that. But the Mets carried a 3-run lead into the 9th inning, and Edwin Diaz got the job done. He did give up a leadoff triple, which I'm sure got a lot of our heart rates going, but he was able to get a big strikeout after that, got a ground out that scored the run that got the Mets 1 out closer, and then he struck out Charlie Blackmon to end the game, pick up his 14th save of the season. If I have it right in my head here, I think it's like his last, I want to say 8 outings. He's 7 for 8 in save chances. And then the one that he did not just save in was that game against the Pirates where he coughed up the lead, but then got the win in a 1-run fashion in the 9th inning. So I still counted it as basically a save because he did his job in the 9th. So it just shows you that Edwin Diaz has been a lot better. And luckily, the Mets were able to survive to get this victory. Hopefully, the floodgates open on Thursday as the Mets have one more game here against the Rockies. What I want to talk about next, though, is who can step up next to Francisco Lindor and be the second best player on this team. We'll talk about that in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase, where you can see the view of your seat before you arrive, so you know exactly what to expect. It's all in pricing up front, so you don't get hit with some hidden fees when you go to checkout. They're all there for you as you're shopping for your seats. And also, Game Time has flash deals where you can get discounted seats in a certain section if you let Game Time assign a seat to you. If you want to buy tickets to the next Mets game at home at Citi Field, make sure you use Game Time, download the Game Time map, take the guesswork out of buying tickets, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You also get the lineup graphics sent to your phone each day, so you know who's going to be the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, during the game today, when Pete Alonso came up in that spot in the ninth inning, if I'm not mistaken, they flashed on the screen his numbers in late and close situations. Now, these are late inning pressure situations, which are defined by any at bat in the seventh inning or later, where a batter's team trails by 3 runs or fewer, is tied, or is ahead by only 1 run. So I thought, you know what? Let's look at all the Mets this year. Who has been the best in the clutch? Francisco Lindor leads the team in RBIs in those spots with 13. Now, he hasn't even been great, hitting 241, 710 OPS. I would imagine that those numbers have gotten better as the season has wore on. So if you were to throw out the first couple months, there's a chance that those numbers look a lot better for Lindor, because I think he didn't come through in any of those spots to start the season, and he definitely has been a lot better lately. Beyond that, though, not a lot of guys that have been good in those spots. At volume, Harrison Bader has probably been the best in those situations, hitting 308. In a smaller sample size, Jose Iglesias is 4 for 10, so he's batting 400 in those spots. Brett Beatty, surprisingly enough, 5 for 18. That's a 278 average. JD Martinez hit 3 home runs in those situations, so he has a 909 OPS. He's hitting 257 in those late close situations. Then you have Brandon Nimmo, who actually has been decent in those spots because he's hit 4 home runs, which has him at a 955 OPS and 11 RBIs. With that said, hitting just 238. Pete Alonso, with what they showed on the screen, hitting 140, the 607 OPS, only 1 home run. Mark Vientos, Francisco Alvarez, I think both were sub 600 OPS, so not great from either of those guys either. Okay, so who can be the second best player for the Mets moving forward, though? And that doesn't just mean the clutch situations. That's got to be a team thing more than anything else. But even just early in the games, who's going to hit the 3-run homer to give the Mets an early lead so your starting pitcher can really settle in? Who's going to be the guy that goes 4 for 5 against a division rival and carries you to a victory over the Braves in that tough series at the end of September, or against the Phillies coming up early next month? Who's going to be those guys that are going to step up? Because Francisco Lindor has shown the ability over the last couple months to really be the guy. He's the Mets' most valuable player, no doubt about it, and he has entered the fringes of that conversation in the National League. I still think it's Ohtani's race to lose, but Ketel Marte and Francisco Lindor are the two guys that are starting to have a narrative build in their favor to potentially topple Ohtani, as no DH only has ever won the MVP. One of those two guys leading their teams in a wild card race could potentially grab it. I don't think Lindor wins the MVP this year, but I think this might be the highest he'll ever finish in his career. Up to this point, he has 1 5th-place finish, 1 6th-place finish, and I believe 3 9th-place finishes, including the last 2 years with the Mets. I think he's going to finish in the top 3 this year. He's clearly the guy. But every Batman needs a Robin. So who's that Robin for Francisco Lindor this year? You would say Brandon Nimmo. But Brandon Nimmo has not been great this season. He has a career 818 OPS. And we could talk about the advanced metrics, how hard he's hitting the baseball, how he's scoring up, how his BABIP is low, he's hit into some bad luck. Let's table all the excuses, okay? We're now into August. You are what your numbers are. And Brandon Nimmo's got a 754 OPS on the season. In his career, since 2017, which was his second season, really when he established himself. I think 2016 was more September call-up type deal. Since 2017, he has only finished with a sub 800 OPS twice. In 2017, when his OPS was 797. Then in 2019, when he dealt a neck injury. If you remember that season, Nimmo played through it for a little bit, had some really bad numbers, ended up on the IL for a long time, comes back down the stretch at the end of August, throughout September, had a really good close to that season, and then 2020 and beyond, it's just been a fantastic player year over year. So a sub 800 OPS for Nimmo, it's starting to trend to a point where you could say a career worst year for Brandon Nimmo since he's been established. And he's supposed to be the second best player on this team if you're just looking at the contract, but also based on prior production. either him or Alonso offensively, and we've spent enough time on Pete Alonso. Brandon Nimmo's got to step up. He had one great month this year, and that was in June, where he hit 315, 406 on base percentage, 598 slug, 6 home runs, 21 RBIs, and OPS over 1,000. Since July, he's hitting below the Mendoza line. So if you want to look at a guy that's got to step up the most, it's Nimmo. And we talked about this on yesterday's show as I went through 5 struggling hitters in the Mets. Nimmo was one of them. But if you're just looking at who's going to be Robin, if it's not Nimmo, I don't know who it is. It's either Nimmo or Alonso or maybe JD Martinez, and the other wild cards are Mark Vientos or Francisco Alvarez. Now there's 8 weeks left in the season, so maybe there's not a Robin this year. Maybe it's just a collection of players. And if you get a hot week or 2 for Francisco Alvarez, and then Mark Vientos has a 3 home run week, and then Pete Alonso and JD Martinez, they take their turns, and Jeff McNeil just had a hot stretch. Maybe he has another in him. Maybe it's a collection of guys. Maybe it's just a movie where Robin's not present, like the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy, and you got an Alfred, a Lucius Fox, and a James Gordon, and you don't got a Robin. And maybe that's Jesse Winker, Harrison Bader, and Tyrone Taylor for all we know in a given week. And it's just a bunch of guys chipping in to help out old Batman and Francisco Lindor. And I know really if we're talking about Batman, New York City and Gotham, New York Mets, there's only one guy and his career's over, Matt Harvey. But just as it relates to the superstar and who's that guy, that sidekick, I just don't see it on this team right now unless Brandon Nimmo can have another June. If Brandon Nimmo can put together a stretch for 8 weeks here and be not necessarily the OPS over 1,000, but put together a 900 OPS for 8 weeks. Nimmo is capable of that, and he could hit home runs now too. He could be a run producer. He could be driving in Francisco Lindor as the two of them are atop that lineup producing for this team. But if he's not going to come through in those spots, you almost have to think about dropping him in the lineup and finding guys who will. Whether that's Jesse Winker, as he did the job today, whether that's hopefully a JD Martinez that turns around, maybe it's Alvarez, maybe it's Vientos, maybe it's someone I'm not even thinking about, like a Starling Marte coming off the IL. But Lindor's going to need some help to get this job finished. Hopefully, these other guys can step up for him because he is putting together a very strong season. And it was just another great notch in his belt of, fantastic moments from this year to come through late in this game where it felt like the Mets were just not going to get the big hit. Of course, when Lindor gets the chance, he doesn't waste any time. He does it. So hats off to him. And we'll see moving forward who can be that guy. What I want to talk about in the final segment is some top prospect stuff. Is there a Robin waiting in the wings? Is there a young kid in the farm system that can be that guy? We'll go through that, as well as another injury update, as well as an update on the Braves. So we got a lot to talk about in the final segment. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get supplies from the site that's made for skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is a reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online with their easy-to-use website that is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining Supply House's free Trade Master program, where every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from a free membership at supplyhouse.com/T-M and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports by checking out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. Now, with all this talk about having a Robin to Francisco Lindor's Batman, is there a player waiting in the wings to assume that role moving forward as a top prospect establishes themselves? Let's talk about the current crop, the guys that have graduated from the top prospect list and are trying to establish themselves as bona fide big leaguers. Mark Vientos has the highest stock right now, specifically from the perspective of his offensive value. Francisco Alvarez right there with him, but Vientos swinging a better bat this year. He's the guy you'd probably point to first as far as being the bat that could complement Lindor for a long time. And while I do believe in Vientos to a very high degree, I think he's going to hit 40 home runs in the big leagues one day. I don't know if he's going to be the second best player on this team. I find it hard to believe that he will be. As good as I think he can be, I just don't think he has that level of ceiling where he's a perennial all-star. Ronnie Mauricio and Brett Beatty, two guys who aren't on this team right now. At one point, maybe you believed in their ceiling. I was never as high on Mauricio as most. I've always been a little bit down on him. I just don't think he's going to be the guy to be consistent over a 6-month season. Will he show flashes? Will he be Batman himself for a couple weeks? Yeah, he might be. But he's going to have a lot of valleys that go with those peaks. So I don't think Mauricio is that guy. We'll see next year. Beatty, my stock on him was much higher than most going into the season. I still think I'm probably one of the higher men on him as far as people that still believe that he can be a starter, but a high impact all-star starter, that I don't think I'm even buying in on anymore. Now, Francisco Alvarez is the clear-cut guy. We've talked about him in the past. He's supposed to be the perennial all-star, and I still think he has that in him. It might take some time to get there to round out his game, and I think he has had a season right now where the injuries have sort of dragged him down a bit. In the future, I think it'll be important for the Mets to not have a DH like JD Martinez bogging down that spot and always having a pretty good backup so that you could keep Alvarez in the lineup when he does reach his potential in the big leagues as a hitter, so he can always be in there. And I think it could be Alvarez. I really do believe that he is still, of all the young players the Mets have in their farm system and on their big league roster, he has the highest ceiling. He's the guy I look at and say, oh, he can be a perennial all-star. He can be the second best player on this team. Hell, he can be the best player on this team one day. But it's still a lot to ask of the kid to command the pitching staff, to do all of that work, and then also be one of your best hitters. It's just going to take some time. And I think there's still some better moments ahead. And honestly, could Alvarez be the guy for the final 8 weeks of this season? I'd bet on him more than a lot of other guys in this lineup to get hot. So I definitely think Alvarez is your best bet. But when we sort of shift this conversation to the guys that are still on the top prospect list, I do think that there is maybe a lacking of that guy that has the superstar potential. Jet Williams is the top position player prospect in this system right now. Now, I love Jet as a prospect. I think he's going to be a very good big league starter. A guy that's going to give you great defense wherever you put him, whether that's center field, second base. We'll see exactly where he lands. But he's going to be a very high impact player with his glove. He's super athletic. His speed on the bases and his intelligent base running is going to be really big for the Mets. A guy that can score a ton of runs. I think he's going to get on base at a great clip and hit for a pretty high average. Is he going to tap into the power to the degree where he could be the best player on the Mets one day? That's where I'm still not quite sure about what his future holds. And the fact that we haven't got to see him play this year doesn't help much in that manner or in that matter. Now, Drew Gilbert's finally playing, and it's good to see him get into the lineup consistently in AAA. We're going to be able to get now a 2-month sample size pretty much of him getting consistent run, and that is really valuable going into next year. Does he have all-star potential? I don't know. Is he going to be the second best player in the Mets ever? Right now, I don't think so. Really, there's two guys. There's one where it's just, he's got the new car smell, man. That's Carson Bench. Just drafted in the first round. Chris Gross, who heads up the draft for the Mets, said, 5-tool potential on Bench. So we're still dreaming there. We haven't watched him play in any professional games yet. So that's one of those where we have to really wait to actually put that type of a label on him. For now, we can still have all of the hope in the world on him because we haven't seen him in games yet. We don't know what that potential truly is. The guy I really wanted to mention, though, is Ryan Clifford. Ryan Clifford, who is in Double-A right now, he's got a shot to be a really good player because he has great plate discipline, a lot of power. He could be someone that comes up, hits 40-plus home runs, could be your first baseman, I think best possible outcome, he can stick in right field, does have a plus arm out there. It's just a matter of if his route running is going to be good enough that he can hang in the outfield in a long-term capacity instead of just maybe the first couple years of his career. We'll see positionally where he fits, but the bat's going to play. I really do believe that. He's getting better and better in Double-A, has had much better success there than in High A. They promoted him to sort of get him out of that ballpark in Brooklyn, which can be tough on a left-handed hitter in particular. And now we're seeing him really do it in Double-A. So Ryan Clifford is one of those guys that I look at and think he might be the highest potential bat in the farm system right now. So if I had to sort of bet on who's going to be the second best player on the Mets in 3 years, I think I'd be splitting my chips between Alvarez and Clifford, probably more towards Alvarez. And honestly, in 3 years, he might be better than Lindor. But those are the guys that they're going to have to play very key roles in the Mets' future. Now, getting through some news items to close the show, Starling Marte made his rehab debut in Port St. Lucie, went 1 for 3 with a stolen base, playing as the DH. On Thursday, he's going to be in the outfield for 5 innings, then move along to Double-A this weekend potentially, and there's some hope that he can join the Mets on this homestand coming up. So that's next week. Now, the Mets do have the benefit of having Jesse Winker and Harrison Bader and Tyrone Taylor. They can ease him in. They can DH him a little bit. You know, JD Martinez isn't swinging the highest of bats, so you always could have Marte get a game at DH each week and then also get a couple in the outfield. You don't have to play him 9 full innings. He can start a game against a left-handed pitcher. When that starter goes out, all right, you sub in a Harrison Bader or a Tyrone Taylor, whoever's not in the starting lineup with him. I think this is going to be good, though, for the Mets to get a right-handed bat on the bench, as well as in the starting lineup at times, too. But just a guy that can give you another option when you have a tough lefty in the game, a pinch hitting option, as well as, again, a guy that can start against a lefty. I think Marte is going to provide a lift, and we'll see how much he actually does play down the stretch. But the Mets can really take care of him, I think, and hopefully when the games matter the most, Marte is at full strength. Also, Reed Garrett is heading back to the Mets very soon. There's a good chance, according to Carlos Mendoza, that he will be there for the series in Seattle. So this weekend, we could see Reed Garrett. The Mets would have to make a roster move. That could be one of the lefties, Alex Young, Danny Young. They also, if they wanted to, could option Huascar Brazaban. He has an option if they wanted to use it. I don't think they would. I'd imagine it's probably Danny Young. But that's going to be interesting nonetheless to see what happens when Reed Garrett comes back. The only other option would be to DFA Adam Ottavino, but I don't think they're going to go there just yet. All right, last but not least, the Mets are just a half a game back of the Braves going into Thursday's contest against the Rockies. David Peterson on the mound versus Austin Gomber. If the Mets win that game, there is a decent chance the Braves will lose as they're playing the Brewers, and the Brewers have scored 18 runs across the first 2 games of this series, and Charlie Morton is going on Thursday, and Morton has not pitched well lately. So there is a shot here the Mets could be back in the wild card picture, and it just sets up what's going to be a very interesting final 8 weeks of the season here because it's starting to feel like Mets or Braves. Now, the Cardinals, the Giants, the Cubs, the Reds, technically, there's other teams that could enter this conversation. Absolutely, particularly the Cardinals, who are there right now. Pirates, I can't forget them. They're definitely in the mix. But the Diamondbacks and the Padres keep on winning, and they look like a better team than the rest of these wild card contenders here. It feels like it might come down to Mets or Braves. And that's going to set up a fascinating series, the second to last one of the year, when those two teams go head-to-head. Eerily similar to 2022. Mets versus Braves, second to last series of the season. We'll see if the Mets get a better result this time, but there's still a lot of baseball to be played before then. And I'll be covering all of it for you here with Locked On Mets, although we might talk Mets Braves a little bit on tomorrow's show, so make sure you don't miss that. If you're listening on the audio side, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Trying to get to 10,000 subs by the end of the season, so I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen or your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything the world of sports. talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local experts from each team and our league-wide experts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube and on Amazon Fire TV.